Dreaming of Hair by Li Young Lee is Li Young Lee sort of going through his mind and showing various moments where his relationship to hair was particularly important at triggering previous memories that sort of all go through a theme of love, whether it be love towards parents or love towards his wife or love towards his brother. And so he uses hair as a sort of symbol or physically to sort of show love, memory, and culture. He also uses sort of diction to sort of continue the references to hair, while also using many metaphors and to sort of continue his argument or his sort of meaning of the poem and sort of his authorial intentions of showing how sort of the importance of maybe small objects or physical things that can have such massive significance for us. And I think that for me, my takeaway for the poem is I do not necessarily relate to him in terms of his relationship to hair, but I can relate to him to understanding how, for many of us, small things can trigger sort of very strong memories or thinking of the past. So he starts off the poem in the first 3 lines of vividly sort of describing 2 interesting things about plants growing and a sun shining on a mouse. But both of these beautiful images, while they are beautiful, they are all temporary. They are sort of not happening forever, unlike it sort of establishes a sort of temporary status to them in the beginning. He also uses language such as ties, wraps, and binds to show how to vividly sort of depict hair in this instance, and sort of use the language of hair even though in context when it's sort of not, that sort of builds an image of hair. Now he says that this is sort of the first introduction to hair that we get, where he says, "Love binds me to the one whose hair I found in my mouth," shows that he has sort of a special significance or relationship to hair. Now he says, wondering, is it death, which makes us question whether or not he has any sort of connection between death and hair, which we will soon find out due to his relationship to his father. Now the stars spreading in every direction is sort of figurative language to describe the hair at the top and the crown of someone's head going in all directions, sort of how it's magnificent or beautiful. And the next stanza, when he talks about his love's hair as autumn's hair, it sort of implies that it might be falling out in small pieces because as the sort of humans develop, because there's a lack of sunlight, there's not necessarily a need for them to grow as much hair, so it sort of sheds, and that sort of explains why as the sun ripens that it's sort of affecting him. When he gives sort of the metaphor of his fingers harvesting the dark vegetable of her body, I interpret this to be him sort of going through her hair, whether it be with his hand, and sort of harvesting those memories that he gets from touching other people's hair or remembering that. So then he sort of ends this stanza by saying, "I sleep again," which structurally indicates a break as he falls asleep after he removes the hair from his mouth. But what's interesting is the very next stanza, he is in a dream. So it's kind of interesting that we have sleep again, a break, and then he's in a dream. Now we have more sort of figurative language and potentially personification of, or more of a metaphor of hair to something like the plant-like. It sort of hair spills, it tangles, it thickens, right? It's so he does sort of how it sprouts, actually is the word that I was looking for. And he sort of goes from his stomach to his heart and tangles the brain, sort of how it shows how it has a all-encompassing sort of relationship to him. And I also think it's interesting that he says hair ties the tongue dumb. Maybe that could potentially be through love and sort of embarrassment when we are around others. Now, when he sort of talks about how hair ascends the tree of my childhood, I think that this is talking about how hair has the ability to bring back memories for him, specifically childhood. I think the use of a willow is particularly important because when you look at a willow, it looks like it has hair sort of coming down from its branches. Now, he's very detailed in his depiction of the willow, and I think that's sort of why is because he has the sort of connection of it to hair, which is so good at bringing back memories. Now he has the sort of tidbit about his father yelling, "Don't fall," and this continues a motif within many of Li Young Lee's poem about familial protection and love that his father shared for him. Now, sort of the next stanza talks about how in his dream he's able to go back in time through these sort of past summers, and it's going back to his mother's hair and sort of when he was younger, when he touched the thistle in it because it was distracting him. Sort of shows a sacrifice that he had for her because he bled, but it was out of love, or sort of because it was too distracting, and sort of the rhetoric of sleeping beside her and waking up with the hair in his mouth shows that he was sort of comforted with a hair or her physical presence, and it's still something that he does today, which shows that it's something that's particularly important to her. So now we have sort of a transition from hair being used in love to hair being used particularly in culture. So tying this particular knots, or sort of fish and lion heads as Chinese cultural icons, or chrysanthemum buds as a Chinese symbol for autumn, or the heads of Chinamen, show that there's sort of a cultural connection to him for the hair. And then the next stanza where he talks about his brother goes back to sort of the love that he described for people like his mother, for people like his father. The stanza after that is sort of him asking a bunch of questions, yet all of the answers to the questions are hair. And what it does is it sort of shows all the multifaceted meanings and applications that hair can have. Filters sunlight, filter so blocking the sun from our eyes, or absorbing the light from the moon, or what is sort of misplacing his heart and his love, or the potential to stop great machines, or tangle and snap looms. So he sort of shows the significance that hair has not only to him, but also to the world. So then he sort of goes in the next stanza to talking about his father. So he's talking about the relationship that hair has to sort of his heart, and how it sort of can connect him to his father. He says that it binds him to the earth. It goes in one shoe and goes out the next. And he says what remembers the dead and grows towards them is talking about how it potentially could be passed down. Now, when he says that he's tired of thinking, this is a transition to him sort of understanding the relationship to hair, and saying things like, I long to taste the world with a kiss. That's not necessarily a kiss of someone he loves face, but rather kissing a hair, and that sort of invoking all these powerful memories and powerful feelings. Then sort of the anecdote that he provides about the mole on his father's hair is sort of talking about how he recognizes the hidden wisdom that his father had, which is so apparent in the other poems, and sort of how the knowledge that his father had may not have always been apparent, but it certainly was in terms of the lessons that he learned. And sort of a lone planet spinning is a metaphor for sort of how knowledgeable his father truly is. Now, he sort of then transitions to his love in sort of talking about how sometimes when she's sad, he's trying to comfort her, and but he thinks about how hair grows after death. This has a literal meaning in terms of it still grows, but I think it could also mean in terms of passing down your traits, your genes, your culture, things like that. And then he says, he grabs handfuls of his hair, and it's because he's sort of overwhelmed with this worry of death and sadness that he needs to be sort of uplifted in spirit, and hair can particularly do that to him. Now, the ending of this poem is sort of interesting and not necessarily calibrated with the rest of the poem, as he sort of ends by talking about what is it that people admire more, sort of the love that they have for their spouse or their line of work. And I think that it's obvious that Li Young Lee's answer to this question is certainly his spouse, because of the admiration and language that he uses to describe her, and the way that he is tender in his relationship to her.